In this video, we're going to go over how to set up an Excel spreadsheet to help us do some calculations involving the empirical rule. Now, the first thing I want to point out before we do any math is that I am again in the Chapter 3 reusable spreadsheet that we already started making a couple of classes ago. Now, what that means is that I am in the same spreadsheet where I made my grouped mean calculator and where I made my weighted mean calculator. So you should open that back up from your OneNote and add in 2 more tabs to it at the bottom, an empirical rule tab and a Chebyshev's rule tab. So in this video, we're going to be focusing on the empirical rule. To use the empirical rule, we are going to have to know our mean and our standard deviation for our data set. So the first thing I did is I typed those in, and I'm going to have to tell Excel what those values are. So I'm going to highlight them yellow because that'll remind me, hey, this is where I have to enter a number. And to continue on from here, the rest of this is just Excel actually doing some calculations for us. So what we want to know is if this is the mean and this is the standard deviation, then I want to know what is the range of values for 68% of the data. Right, what range of values will include 68% of the data? So it's going to be from some low number up to some high number. And this is where it'll be useful to kind of see this in action to actually put in some data. So I'm going to use this example over here. The average height of male students at Waterford High School is 67 inches, so that's our mean, with a standard deviation of 3.5 inches. That's our standard deviation. So to find the range of values that includes 68% of male students at Waterford High School, the first thing we have to do is remember that, hey, 68%, that is between 1 standard deviation above the mean and 1 standard deviation below the mean. So I'm just going to do exactly that calculation. The mean plus 1 standard deviation, that's going to give me the top of the range of values. And equals the mean minus 1 standard deviation, that's going to give me the bottom of the range of values. So this tells me right off the bat that between heights of 63.5 inches and 70.5 inches, 68% of the male students at Waterford High School will fall in that range of heights. We can set up a very similar calculation for the other 2 parts of this. So the range of values for 95% of the data, and skip a couple rows, the range of values for 99.7% of the data. So for 95%, this is again going to be a very similar calculation, but this time it is plus 2 standard deviations and then minus 2 standard deviations. So we'll do equals, click on the mean, plus 2 times the standard deviation. Hit enter. Equals, click on the mean, plus 2 times the standard deviation. Hit enter. Oop, I did plus again. That should have been a minus. Hopefully you caught that and said, hey, Mr. Shetty, what are you doing? That should be a minus there. And then for 99.7%, this is the same idea, except it's 3 standard deviations. So equals the mean plus 3 times the standard deviation, and the mean minus 3 times the standard deviation. So again, what this tells me is if I want to know what range of values will 68% of students or 95% of students or 99.7% of students fall in for heights, these are going to be those numbers. And the nice thing here is that if my data set changes, so if I have a different data set, and let's say that the mean height in this case is 64 inches, all of these values down here adjust accordingly. So how can we actually use this? Well, there's pretty much 2 different types of questions we could be asked. We could say, what percentage of male students have heights between 63.5 inches and 70.5 inches? So we'll come over here and we'll find those values. And I notice, hey, that's right here, 63.5 to 70.5. So that goes with 68%. So for question 1, I would say it's 68%. For question 2, what range of values will include 99.7% of male students? Well, for that, I come down here, I find 99.7, and I say, okay, well, there's my range of values. So for number 2, it's 56.5 to 77.5. That is my range of heights that gives that 99.7% of male students at Warford High School will fall in for their heights. So you can use this to go either direction. The same spreadsheet will get you both answers.